and welcome. In this video, I'm going to be talking about games and agency. The basic definition of agency is acting with the intention of a particular result. It is a remarkably simple and important idea, especially when we are dealing with any kind of communication and any type of media. It is important because it recognizes the active role of the audience and their ability to make choices. Platforms like Netflix are popular because they increase choice. But, like social media, they can also influence choice. Facebook is particularly good at using the data from previous choices to influence future ones. But that does not detract from the reality that users still have a choice. Games. Whether it's the latest mobile app, a pen and paper role-playing game, an indie game, or an FPS, all provide the player with the opportunity to express different degrees of agency. A game provides the player with opportunities to act. However, how much and what kinds of acts they enable cover an incredible range, and so there are many accounts in the literature of game studies as to what constitutes agency in games and what that agency actually means. In this video, I'm going to draw on Stephanie Jennings' meta-analysis of the ways that agency has been accounted for in game studies, in order to give you a very brief overview. I'm only going to summarize key points from this excellent resource, and certainly not going to do the paper on the field of game studies justice in this brief account. But there are a few points that I really want to focus on. The classic starting point for talking about agency in games is Janet Murray's description of agency as an aesthetic experience. Murray defines agency as the satisfying power to take meaningful action and see the results of our decisions and choices. This seems like common sense, but it's often overlooked, particularly because games are enmeshed in the woolly thinking about media effects and the incorrect idea that violent movies or violent games make people more violent. Instead, agency implies power, but more importantly, manipulation. But the ability to exert that power, or to seek to influence, lies with the player, and it is the measure of good game design that drives a player to explore. A game should support and augment the desire to engage with the system, and to assist the player in becoming active participants in the creation of their experience through interaction with code during gameplay. But this opens up questions about agency that Jennings defines as the distinction between experience and action. Is the satisfying power of agency an experience, or is agency a capacity to create actual, concrete, observable changes based on specific actions and choices? This is an important distinction to make when talking about agency. Is agency the potential capacity to make choices, or the actual experience that players embody when playing? This is a really important distinction that applies to all types of media. Think about advertising and social influencer marketing. When you follow someone on Instagram and they advertise a product, you can get a satisfying power from liking the image or even purchasing that product. But what about the opposite? Think about the experience of satisfying power in writing a negative comment, or even simply the choice not to like, not to purchase, and to express yourself in that way. Now compare that to the design of the platform that expresses that user agency, even in limited ways. Remember, it is the system that allows you to follow and unfollow, to like or ignore, but it is also the system of algorithmic advertising that is sharing that content with you in the first place in the order and in the way that it is doing so. These are the affordances of the platform. So think about how that satisfying power of agency might be diminished if that comment is moderated or not allowed to be made at all. One way to think about agency and games is a balance between the ludic rules, algorithms, mechanics, etc., elements of play, and its narrative or its character, story, and setting. Murray uses this relationship between the ludic and the narrative to describe the idea of dramatic agency, the way that games can offer players opportunities to connect with characters, stories, locations, and narratives through its design. She sees particular opportunity in the future of VR. Dramatic agency is part of what Jennings calls the representational power of performing as a character within the game as part of its procedures and its environments. Although this is debated in game scholarship because of its ideological resistance to what is described as hegemonic discourse. As Jennings suggests, mainstream game design overwhelmingly affirms agency as the exclusive purview of masculinity, whiteness, heterosexuality, and able-bodiedness. Do indie games, then, represent greater agency for game designers' own agency, as a site available to challenge these historical norms by enabling players to embody alternative characters, settings, and experiences? Another approach is Brendan Keogh's work, which has explored the cybernetic relationship between players' bodies and game design as the player becomes entangled in the world of video games and the world of corporeal existence. The concept of cybernetics and the machine-human network of actants complicates the idea of agency, as the player's freedom, control, and autonomy are revealed as being not entirely free, but actually very constrained by a layer of biological, mechanical, hardware, and software systems. Even when we have a choice, that hardware and software limitation of the machine and of the human, including the player's own minds, put necessary limitations on the experience of choice. Does that mean, however, that players' choices are simply well-designed illusions? The concept of agency is often used synonymously to mean freedom, choice, control, autonomy, action, etc. And one of the most famous game designs which sought to reveal the illusion of player agency is BIOSHOCK by Ken Levine, published by 2K Games in 2007. Now, even though this is quite an old game, I'm not going to go into spoilers because it really is worth the experience, and it's very affordable now, and if you have access to it on console or PC, I highly recommend it. Instead, I'm going to read this quote from Parker that's cited in Jennings' analysis. BIOSHOCK is designed from the ground up to invite sustained reflection, debate, and criticism, as evidenced by the countless forum discussions, blog posts, essays, articles, chapters, theses, and even academic monographs it has produced. This is not just a game with something to say, but a game worth saying something about. A game that justifies the whole enterprise of game criticism and scholarship. BIOSHOCK is designed to make you question the relationship between the experience of power and the necessary limitations on the ability to enact power in a given system. It helps us to ask if agency is actually possible, or if the very function of all media is to manipulate, constrain, and delineate choice in order to convey meaningful experiences. Is the act of experiencing satisfying power a result of systems that are designed to provide that affective sensation while in reality limiting our choices and our freedoms? This is perhaps most elegantly summarized in the classic 1980s movie War Games, in which an artificial intelligence comes to the realization that sometimes the only agency actually afforded by any situation which limits choice in order to facilitate an experience is not to play at all. I've really only touched the tip of the iceberg when it comes to talking and thinking about agency and media. And so I recommend digging into Jennings' analysis and engaging in the further reading on agency that I will add to the resources on the learning site. Thanks for playing.